For 30 long years Nuru waited. She had lived through the whispers of villagers, the stinging questions of relatives, and the deep, hollow ache of emptiness in her heart. Every morning she rose with the same hope, and every night she went to bed with the same sorrow. Childless. Nuru had been married to Kofi, a hard-working farmer, for most of her adult life. Their union was one celebrated by the entire village of Mbeo, for Kofi was known to be a kind man, and Nuru, the daughter of the chief, was beloved by many. They had everything they could want: land, livestock, respect from their peers. But the one thing they desired most, a child, eluded them. Years passed, and while their friends and family raised their children, Nuru and Kofi were left alone in their large, empty house. They visited every medicine man, every herbalist, every healer in the region, but still no child came. Nuru's heart grew heavy with shame and sorrow. She avoided gatherings and celebrations where children played because the sight of them reminded her of her unfulfilled dreams. One evening, after another failed attempt at consulting a healer in a far-off village, Nuru sat beneath a large baobab tree near their home. Her face was etched with the lines of years of sadness, and her eyes were full of tears that never seemed to run dry. Kofi, ever patient, sat beside her in silence, his hand resting gently on her back. "Nuru, maybe we should stop chasing after this dream," he said softly. "Perhaps it is time to accept that the gods have another plan for us." Nuru wiped her tears and shook her head. "I cannot give up, Kofi. I cannot." That night Nuru had a dream. In her dream, a tall, old woman with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that glowed like embers appeared before her. The woman carried a basket filled with seeds, and she smiled warmly at Nuru. "Why do you cry, daughter?" the old woman asked. "I have waited for a child for so long, and yet the gods have not blessed me," Nuru replied. The old woman nodded and handed her the basket. "Take these seeds and plant them beneath the baobab tree. Water them every day, and in time you will receive what you desire." When Nuru awoke, the dream was still vivid in her mind. She rushed to Kofi and told him everything. Though he was skeptical, Kofi saw the determination in Nuru's eyes and agreed to help her. Together, they gathered seeds from the market and planted them beneath the great baobab tree. Every day, Nuru watered the seeds. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Nothing seemed to happen, but Nuru did not give up. She returned to the baobab tree every morning and every evening, praying and nurturing the seeds, believing in the words of the old woman in her dream. The day Nuru realized she was pregnant was like any other. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting golden light over the village of Mbeo. Nuru, as was her routine, had just returned from tending to the seeds she had planted under the ancient baobab tree, the memory of the mysterious old woman's words still lingering in her mind. It began with a flutter, a small, barely noticeable stirring in her belly. First she dismissed it. Over the years, her mind had played cruel tricks on her, making her believe she felt something only to be disappointed. But this time, the sensation grew stronger with each passing day. By the third week, her once flat stomach had started to swell unmistakably. She told no one at first, not even Kofi. She didn't dare speak it aloud, fearing that even the breath of her words might shatter the fragile dream. But one morning, as she bathed by the river, the reality of her condition could no longer be ignored. Her belly, round and full, had taken on the unmistakable shape of pregnancy. Kofi noticed, of course. He was a man of patience, but even he couldn't hide his astonishment when Nuru finally told him the truth. "Nuru, how?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion as his trembling hand reached out to touch her growing belly. "I don't know, Kofi," she replied, her own voice shaky. "But the gods have finally heard our prayers." The news spread like wildfire. The childless woman of Mbeo, barren for 30 years, was pregnant. The villagers came from near and far to witness the miracle with their own eyes. Some praised her, while others whispered that such a late pregnancy was unnatural. But Nuru paid them no mind. She had waited for this moment her entire life, and nothing could dampen her joy. As the months passed, her belly swelled larger than any of the village women had ever seen. It was clear that something extraordinary was happening. Some feared for Nuru's health, thinking no woman could carry a pregnancy like this to term. The village elders gathered to pray for her safety, and Kofi never left her side. When the time for her delivery finally came, the village fell into an anxious hush. The healers and midwives entered Nuru's hut, prepared for the worst. The labor was long and intense. Nuru's cries echoed through the night, and many feared she would not survive. Nuru's labor stretched on, each minute heavy with tension. The village of Mbeo stood still, waiting for news as time slowed to a crawl. Inside the hut, the midwives worked tirelessly, their hands skilled but their faces tense with concern. Kofi remained by Nuru's side, whispering prayers, his heart pounding in fear and hope. As dawn began to break, the first cry of a newborn filled the room. A wave of relief washed over everyone, but the midwives knew there was more to come. 1 child, 2 children, 3. The hours wore on, and child after child was born, each one perfect and healthy. The villagers outside were astonished as the midwives emerged one by one, carrying babies wrapped in soft cloth. When the final child was born, the hut fell silent. Nuru, drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted, could hardly believe what had happened. 30 children, 30 miracles, lay beside her, each one a testament to the impossible. She had waited for so long, and now her patience had been rewarded beyond her wildest dreams. Kofi held one of the babies in his arms. his eyes wet with tears of disbelief. "We are blessed, Nuru," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We are truly blessed." The village erupted in celebration, a joy so profound that it reverberated through the land. Nuru, once the woman who had lived in the shadow of childlessness, was now the mother of 30. Her heart, once filled with sorrow, now overflowed with love. The legend of Nuru and her 30 children would be told for generations, a tale of unwavering faith, boundless patience, and the miracles that come when hope endures. The baobab tree at the center of Mbeo stood tall and proud, its branches heavy with life. Underneath it, where Nuru had planted the seed so many months ago, flowers bloomed in brilliant hues, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, life could find a way to flourish. And so, Nuru's story became a part of the fabric of Mbeo, woven into the hearts of its people. The village thrived, and Nuru, surrounded by her children, lived out her days in peace, knowing that her waiting had not been in vain. Years passed, and the 30 children of Nuru and Kofi grew into strong, vibrant individuals. Each had their own unique personality, talents, and gifts. The village of Mbeo was no longer a quiet, sleepy place. It was bustling with life. Nuru's children, with their boundless energy and curious minds, had brought a new spirit to the land. The villagers marveled at their intelligence and strength, often calling them the seeds of the gods. But as the children grew, so did the challenges. Nuru and Kofi, though filled with love, often found themselves overwhelmed. Raising one child was difficult enough, but 30 was an unimaginable feat. Food, clothes, shelter. Everything had to be stretched thin to meet the needs of their large family. Nuru, who had once longed so deeply for children, now found herself struggling under the weight of her blessings. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Nuru sat beneath the baobab tree once more, her heart heavy with worry. She loved her children dearly, but their constant demands left her exhausted. Kofi, ever patient, sat beside her, sensing the burden she carried. "Nuru, you've given the world a miracle," he said gently, "but I see the weight on your heart. Perhaps it's time to ask the gods for guidance once more." Nuru sighed deeply, her eyes tracing the familiar lines of the great baobab. It had grown even more magnificent since she planted the seeds, its thick branches reaching toward the sky like arms stretching out in prayer. The memory of the old woman from her dream returned to her, the woman who had given her the seeds, who had promised her the impossible. That night, as Nuru slept, the old woman appeared again in her dreams. This time, her face was softer, kinder, but her eyes still burned with the same mysterious glow. "You have done well, Nuru," the old woman said, her voice like the rustle of leaves in the wind. "But every blessing carries a burden. What weighs on your heart?" Nuru hesitated, but then with tears in her eyes, she spoke. I love my children more than anything in this world. But I am only one woman. How can I give them everything they need? How can I protect them, feed them, guide them? My strength is failing. The old woman nodded, understanding. The seeds I gave you were not just for you alone, Nuru. They were meant to bring abundance to your people, to the land itself. You are not meant to carry this burden alone. Nuru looked confused. What do you mean? The old woman smiled and raised her hand. You will see. When Nuru awoke the next morning, the air in Bayo felt different. There was a sense of anticipation, as if something important was about to happen. As she stepped outside her hut, she saw her 30 children gathered under the baobab tree. They were laughing and playing as they always did, but there was a new energy among them, a focus that Nuru hadn't noticed before. Over the next few days, the village began to change. The children, who had once been scattered in their activities, started to take on new roles. Some began helping with the farming, their young hands working the land with skill beyond their years. Others gathered herbs and roots, learning the art of healing from the village elders. Some crafted tools, while others learned to hunt and fish. Each child, as if guided by an invisible hand, found their place in the community. Nuru watched in awe as her children not only took on their own responsibilities but also began to teach and lead others. The once quiet village of Mbayo became a center of learning and trade, with people from neighboring villages coming to seek the wisdom of Nuru's children. The crops grew richer, the livestock thrived, and the land itself seemed to prosper under their care. As her children came of age, Nuru realized that the miracle of their birth had not only been for her. It had been for the entire village, perhaps even the whole region. Her children were not just a gift to her. They were a gift to the world. One evening, as the sun set in hues of gold and crimson, Nuru returned to the baobab tree. She knelt beneath its massive trunk, her heart full of gratitude. She whispered a prayer of thanks to the gods, not for the 30 children she had borne, but for the lesson they had taught her, that love and life are not burdens to be carried alone, but shared. As she stood to leave, she saw the old woman again, standing just beyond the edge of the tree's shadow. Her basket was empty this time, but her smile was full of warmth. "Thank you," Nuru said, her voice steady and full of understanding. The old woman nodded, her eyes glowing softly. "You have learned well, daughter. The seeds you planted have grown beyond what you could have ever imagined." With that, the old woman disappeared, leaving Nuru standing alone in the fading light. But this time, Nuru did not feel the weight of uncertainty or fear. She felt only peace, knowing that her children, her 30 miracles, would continue to nurture the land and the people long after she was gone. And so, the legend of Nuru lived on, not just as the mother of 30, but as the mother of a village reborn. Her patience had brought forth more than just life. It had brought prosperity, wisdom, and a future filled with hope. The baobab tree, now more majestic than ever, stood as a symbol of the strength, love, and legacy she had cultivated beneath its branches.